Okay, good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome all councillors, officers and members of the viewing public on YouTube to this virtual meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board. My name is Dr. Grim. I'm the co-chair of the board and I'll be chairing today's meeting. I'd now like to call out the names of all the board members present and ask them to confirm their attendance today. If we have Councillor Rob Appleyard of Baines.
Good morning.
Morning, Councillor. Cara Charles Barks of the IUH.
Good morning.
Morning. Sarah Gallagher of Bath Spa University. Not present yet. Councillor Kevin Guy of Baines. No. Okay. Will Free of Baines.
Oh yeah.
Morning. Julia Griffiths, representing BEMS and Primary Care.
Morning.
Morning, Julia. Paul Harris of Curo.
Morning, Bryn.
Morning. Nicola Hazel, AWP. No, Nicola. Leslie Hutchinson of Baines Council.
Good morning.
Yep. Steve Kendall, representing Police.
Good morning.
Morning. Bruce Lawrence.
Hello.
Morning. Stuart Matthews. No. Kate Morton, Bathmind.
Morning.
Morning, Kate. Laurel Penrose, Bath College. No, not present. Vanessa Scott of Health Watch. No. Richard Smale, CCG.
Morning, Brim.
Morning, Richard. And Joe Scammell, Virgin Care. No, okay. Is there anybody I've missed out there?
Apologies, Chair. I've just arrived late from the schools forum. Councillor Kevin.
Morning, Councillor. Thank you. And I'd just like to welcome Cara, Richard and Julia to their first meeting today. So thank you for attending. Okay, so just some basic points of order. Can I remind everyone to keep the background noise to a minimum, and if we can just speak one person at a time. And if you just please mute your microphones when we're not speaking. And for those who do wish to speak in this virtual setting, please can we just type MIS into the chat function, standing for May I Speak, and I will call you in turn. Okay. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions at this point? No? Excellent. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence and substitution. So Maria, if I can turn to you and check on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have apologies from Corinne Edwards, Mary Kearney Knowles, Kirsty Matthews, who's substituted by Joanna Scammell, Bernie Morley, Vanessa Scott, and Andrew Smith, who's substituted by Julia Griffith.
Excellent. Thank you, Marie. Consider it's just a couple arrived. So we have Joe Scammell from Virgin Care and Sean Walker McAllister. Is there anybody else I've missed before we move on? Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. So take this moment to ask if anyone has anything they would like to declare that's relevant to today's agenda items and what the nature of that business is. No, you can see shaking heads. Excellent. Thank you. So I'll move on quickly to item 4, which is any urgent business agreed by the chairman, and I can confirm that there's no items of urgent business today. So I'd like to move on to item 5, again quickly, which is any public questions or comments, and I believe we have no public questions or statements today. Can I just confirm that, Marie?
That's correct. Yeah, no public questions or statements have been received, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to go on to item 6, if I may, and that's the minutes of the previous meeting. So hopefully all board members have had the opportunity to look at these, and so I just want to confirm that they are a correct and accurate record of the previous meeting. Can I just turn to the board and check if anybody has any points of correction there? No, excellent. Thank you. So we'll take those as a accurate recording of the previous meeting. So I'm actually just going to move on to what is on the agenda as item 9 for reasons that will become apparent, and that's the review of the health and wellbeing strategy working group feedback. So it's going to be presented by David Trethaway, and this is for consideration of the report that the working group have recently produced. And if I can ask David at this point to present that, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm David Trethaway, I'm Director of Partnerships at the Council. I think the main work of the Health and Wellbeing Board is the Health and Wellbeing Strategy, and the existing Health and Wellbeing Strategy has expired. So as a board, you need to consider and agree whether how you wish to handle that strategy. And what the paper sets out is a proposal that we extend the existing strategy, but we conduct a refresh, focusing on issues around inequality and then potentially mental health. But as set out in the paper and as an attached appendix, a key element of the refresh being that we consider working that refresh up in a different way to how we might have done it previously, through some engagement with the broad partnership, looking at the broad issues across the issues of inequality and mental health, and coming forward with proposals to the board which have had that comprehensive working. So the paper you've got covers the formality of that refresh, but also attaches proposals from the working group that the board set up around ways we might do that in the future. Members of the board will have had the opportunity of a discussion on that running up to this, so you may wish to raise key issues from that. But the recommendation of the report is that we agree to that extension, that we focus on that inequality and mental health. And I think the proposal is we focus first on inequality, and that we do that in a way that reflects the recommendations from the strategy working group, which was chaired by Kate Morton. So I'll say no more. The rest of it is in the report, and as I say, the board members have had a pre-discussion around the implications of that different way of working that you may wish to reflect on in this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. If I'd like to turn to the board at this point and invite any questions or comments. Yes, please, Bruce.
Yeah, we had a very interesting discussion, and I agree those conclusions. I just think in many ways inequalities and mental health are not really, they're highly related as well. And when we talk about mental health, we have to see it in the public health sense of it being the product of all elements of how we live and work, as rather than in a kind of narrow way, like some people have mental problems. We all have mental health issues, and they reflect how we live, and particularly at the moment, the stresses we're under. So I just think when we talk about mental health, it is in that really broad sense, as from our discussion it's very broad when we talk about inequalities as well. It's again not in any way a narrow health focused view, although health might be an indicator and an endpoint of inequalities. It's not the substance of it.
Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else like to comment? Yes, Councillor Roback, please.
Yeah, thank you, Bryn. Well, first of all, I think thank you very much to Kate and the Working Party for bringing this together. I think this is an ideal time for us actually to refresh and change the direction of the Health and Wellbeing Board. And I think the focus that has been identified, which is the inequality across the whole authority, I think is welcome and almost late coming to the party, really. I mean, it's something that should have been picked up some while ago, and I'm delighted we're now going to do that and look to make some positive differences and support to many of the people in our communities that are in need of that focus. So it's a good piece of work.
Excellent, thank you, Rob. I agree with that. And if we can turn to Kate now, please.
Thanks, Bryn. I guess I just wanted to echo what we were saying this morning, that I really welcome the wider organisations across BAMES coming together and being able to input into the board and the strategy, and being able to have a kind of coordinated response to the inequalities debate. I think that's going to be really important, those intelligence capturing information. We can just share that across the piece.
Thank you, Kate. So I think this working group has reflected the significance going forward with COVID, and also a reflection of the direction of travel, of the importance, the relevance of this group, and the influence it should be having in shaping the agenda of those we work with in the BAMES setting. And I think a lot of that comes out, and the strategy around inequalities, mental health prevention pieces, I think is something we're all signed up to, and hopefully this will help us focus on how we go about achieving that as a group to be more than the sum of our parts. I'm just looking at the chat. There's no further input into that. So if we can look to, I believe, recommendations, return to these. So to agree, to go through those, agreeing to extend the health and wellbeing strategy until January 2022, conduct a refresh focusing on inequality and mental health, and consider the recommendations of the working group. So if I can turn back to the group, has anybody got any objections to that? If not, I will take that as agreed and recommended. Okay, thank you. And if I just condone, thank you to the working group, to Kate and David and all those that were involved in formulating that. That's very helpful. So I'm going to loop back round now. So I understand we turn to that because it's about the strategy of the board in general, so that will help shape whatever's coming ongoing from that. So I think it's important to address that first. So if we can go now to item 7, which is the Children and Young People Subcommittee update report. So this is highlighting the progress and the approach being taken in that subcommittee. And if I can go to Leslie now to speak on the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So my name's Leslie Hutchinson. I'm the Director for Adult Social Care Complex and Specialist Commissioning, and currently chair the Children and Young People Subcommittee, which is the subcommittee reporting into the Health and Wellbeing Board that has the strategic lead for children and young people. Our current strategy runs from 2018 to 2021, so there's obviously a bit of a mismatch in terms of the dates for which the health and wellbeing strategy and this strategy are aligning to. And we've been doing some work to try and refresh the Children and Young People Subcommittee strategy, so that we can have another strategy in place for 2021 to 2024 going forward. There might need to be a decision made today about whether we just do a refresh of the existing Children and Young People plan in line with the conversation that's just taken place, or whether we do a wholesale review of the strategy and move that forward and then work to integrate the two. We need to probably give some consideration to that. But at the moment, what we've been doing as a subcommittee, you'll remember that we came to you with the end of year 1 report, updating on how we'd got on in terms of achieving the priorities and working towards the outcomes. And then similarly, at the last meeting, we presented the year 2 end of year report, both of which have been approved. We had a development session in July we extended the membership of the subcommittee and invited other partners onto that planning and development session, where we were looking at reviewing what the existing outcomes were and how we might want to move some of the priorities forward. At that session, what became apparent to the group is that everybody was still aligned and felt that the current outcomes were still fit for purpose. And those outcomes are identified on Appendix 1 in your report, which has got the plan on a page. So the 4 outcomes that we're working to currently are that children and young people are safe, children and young people are healthy, children and young people have fair life chances, and that children and young people are engaged citizens within their own community. And the subcommittee members and those engaged in the development session felt that they were still reflective of where we wanted to be in terms of the outcomes we wanted to achieve. We also reflected on the themes and on the commitments and the way that we want to work. And the majority of those we continued and thought that they were still correct. So one of them being strengthening early help and thinking about that in all of our agencies and also hearing the voice of the child. We also need to continue to do that think family approach. But the one thing that we did want to think about more than the workforce, and in fact, was the thing around tackling inequalities, and wanted to make that one of the ways that we agreed that we were going to work and to focus. And I think that fits perfectly with the conversation that we've had just had now about how we want to move forward the new health and wellbeing strategy, because that was the work that we were considering. And we thought about one of our original commitments, the way that we wanted to work was around tackling the gap, narrowing the achievement gap, but actually we wanted to have a broader conversation about tackling inequalities, and that was taking in issues such as food poverty, which we are very concerned about, and also around the impacts of COVID-19 and the impacts that that is having on the social and economic situation for vulnerable families. So again, I think that fits in very much in line with the inequalities conversation that we've been having. We looked at the priority areas that we've been working to and challenged ourselves as to whether we thought that they were going to be the priorities going forward, or whether we needed to change those. And I think having 11 priorities, the whole of the group agreed was far too many, and that we needed to slim that down. Some of the work can be moved into our business as usual work because we are doing that on a day-to-day basis. But the themes that were really sticking out for everybody in the group was the deterioration in that what we were seeing was the change in the complexity of children and young people's needs, but also the deterioration in mental health as well. And again, that's been something that's been recognised by the Youth Forum and the In-Care Council, and they've raised that with the Health and Wellbeing Board. And they've also raised it with the subcommittee themselves. So we want to incorporate key significantly the bit around inequalities, but also the bit around mental health specifically into the new plan going forward. What we've also included in this document is an overview of the training that was developed last year, the strategy that the training programme that was in place, and done the evaluation report. I don't plan to go into any of that into detail. What it just demonstrates is that there's been a plethora of training put forward, and it shows which agencies have participated in that, and a bit of an evaluation of that programme. So we don't need to go into detail on that, but it's there for your information really. One of the things that has come out loud and clear is that because of the changing needs of the children and young people that we're seeing, we need to develop more support for practitioners around working with people with increasing complex needs. So I guess I can summarise now. The request from the Health and Wellbeing Board is that you note the progress that we've been making through the development session, and that you consider the areas that we're thinking of included in our forthcoming work, and you note the evaluation report from the training programme. But I guess I need to add an additional one now, in that shall we be focusing on just extending the strategy that we've got and bringing in those very two clear areas of inequality and mental health, or would you like us to develop the full 3-year strategy?
Okay, if I can invite the board for any questions, please, or any comments. If we'd like to use the chat function, but I can see your hand, Joe, so I'll turn to you at this point.
Sorry. So Les, I agree with those. I'm seeing the priorities, and I think no one would disagree that they are the right priorities, but priorities, they're all encompassing, and therefore my only challenge for us to think of as a board is how do we get real clarity on not rationalizing, but on really having some areas of focus where we can demonstrate achievement of outcomes against, because they are all challenges and they are all priorities in the broadest sense. But how do we really ensure that by having an all-encompassing strategy, we can really focus on a few key areas and then use that to make decisions? So I don't think they're the wrong priorities. I think it's how we almost rank them or rationalize something that can be, you know, specific and measurable. That's my sort of challenge for all of us really going forwards.
Thank you, Jo, and I don't disagree actually.
Yeah, reasonable. Anyone want to come in further? Yes, Paul Harris.
A similar point, really. I applaud the effort to reduce the number of priorities. I mean, looking at that plan on a page, you have values, commitments, priorities, outcomes. It just feels like there's a lot there in terms of the architecture about how you manage the work, and that there's almost an infinite amount you could be doing. So I'm agreeing with Jo, really, that is there a way that you can focus a little bit more narrowly to go a little bit deeper into some of those areas? My view on the strategy would be, you have talked about inequality and mental health anyway, but I would just suggest that you incorporate those as best you can within the existing plan rather than develop a new one for now.
So my request, I suppose, and thank you for that, Paul, is so that is the plan on the page that we had in 2018-21, as you can see. I think we do need to knock some of those, reduce some of those down, because we can't be working to that level. So I will work with the team, actually with the subcommittee, to look at reducing those down and to develop some more focused ones as just been identified. But I don't disagree at all with that. It's a mammoth task, actually, and getting the one vision, the 4 outcomes, the 4 commitments, the 11 priorities, it doesn't flow in the best way that it could, does it? So we will improve that.
Yes, please, Nicola.
Hi, Leslie, do we have any idea out of those 11 in the last couple of years, which ones we have been able to quite demonstrably make those improvements on, and which ones have been more challenging in terms of any kind of review or kind of our position on those?
We brought the year 2 report back to the last meeting, didn't we? I'd need to go back and go back through the detail of that to get you those specifics in that, if you like. And I can do that as an email trail to everybody rather than bring another report back to the meeting. But I think there's been a difference made to each of the areas, because the groups of people that have been working on them have been able to demonstrate that there has been some outcomes achieved in most of the areas, actually. But you'll see even within those priorities that some of them are duplicates in themselves, really. When we've been looking through the responses under 8 and 9, for example, from the previous one, you can see that they overlap. And similarly, we've got the 1, 3 and one of the other ones, number 6, I think it was, where they overlap with the Community Safety and Safeguarding Partnership. So again, I think we need to be slicker in the way that we don't duplicate that work that's coming across from that partnership as well, that Sian will talk about later on. But I can go back, Nicola, to answer your question and look at the work and the outcome that's been achieved against each of those, which we certainly need to for the end of year 3 anyway.
Yeah, I just wonder whether that helps us answer the question that Joe raised in terms of how do we kind of focus down on some of those issues. That might help us work through some of that.
Okay, thank you, Nicola. Richard, please.
Thank you, Bryn. Really support the approach of not redoing the strategy, but just refreshing those bits that are helpful. I'm just interested in, this is my first meeting, so forgive any ignorance on my part, but how in those measures, we've spoken about refining the outcomes of what we would want to do, but how well do we capture the measures from the children and young people's perspective, as well as perhaps process and organize, our sort of more quantifiable things, but how much are we hearing and capturing reflections from them on what difference we've made?
So that comes from a variety of mechanisms, if you like. There's the direct contact that we have with the Youth Forum and the in-care councils, which we meet frequently with. There's also when a young person has received a service, then there's also mechanisms in place to receiving direct feedback from there. And we have participation as part of we have participation as part of the measures, and that's pulled through into some of the other subgroup report and some of the other reports that come. So we can demonstrate quite healthily how the children and young people have helped to influence and how they felt about the service that they've received. That information doesn't necessarily all come through to the Health and Wellbeing Board, and we can share some of that if that would be helpful. And we also have what's called the participation standards that each agency across Bath and North Somerset have signed up to. So those participation standards, we would get reports from all of the commission services that come into the subcommittee, and then we look at how effectively everybody is demonstrating their engagement with those participation standards. So there's a variety of mechanisms where we do get to hear the voice of children and young people, but also through coming to the Health and Wellbeing Board, the request also is that the children and young people come to the Health and Wellbeing Board meeting in the new year to express the work that they've been doing and also share their views about what needs to happen for them. So it does come from a number of different ways, from a strategic end, but also from a what's this service been like for you?
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, I can't see any further questions. So Leslie, can I just clarify the recommendation then, because it's changed, hasn't it? But I think we noted the report. We agreed that the strategy doesn't need rewriting, very complementary to the previous agenda item. So I think there's consensus on that. What about the length of the strategy? Does that need revising in light of the previous item?
I'll take a lead from you. We can just do the refresh the same as what we're proposing for the health and wellbeing strategy up until 2022 with the agreement that's just been made. That seems to be sensible to me.
That would make sense.
We'll be working in tandem, won't we, doing the development of the health and wellbeing strategy, and then the children and young people limb that falls from that, if it is going to fit in to the way we were describing things earlier, can take a lead from that and stick with that 2022, if that's acceptable to everybody.
I think that would be my proposal, if I can turn to the group as the recommendation on that, with your approval, Leslie. So any objections to that? I'll take that silence as agreeing that recommendation then. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for that presentation. I think that's all, yes. Okay. So we'll move on to the next agenda item. So this is from the Baines Community Safety and Safeguarding Partnership Annual Report 2019 to 20. So the board is asked to consider this report, and if I can turn now to Sian Walker McAllister to speak on behalf of the report, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to present this annual report to you, which is a statutory requirement for safeguarding partnerships to present to a Health and Wellbeing Board every year, the report from the previous year. So just a reminder, this is a report leading up to March 2020. The report is a marrying of the reported activity from the previous Safeguarding Children's Board for BAMES and the previous Safeguarding Adults Board, which were in operation up until the end of August 2019. I was appointed in August 2019 and commenced work with the partnership in December. So I'm bringing the report together effectively of the first 6 months of the partnership and the previous 6 months of the former arrangements. The partnership was formed because there had been a previous government requirement to change arrangements for the Safeguarding Children together with the Partnership for Adults and Community Safety, as many of the board members for each of those partnerships attended all the meetings, and we felt it gave us a real opportunity to marry the activity of the partnerships, to marry the strategy of the partnerships, and to ensure that we were working in a much more efficient way to protect and support vulnerable children and vulnerable adults and vulnerable people within our communities. So BAMES has been quite innovative in establishing this partnership. There are only 3 others in the country that are similar. There's the Bristol Safeguarding Partnership, which members might be aware about, and a partnership in Milton Keynes as well. And other local authorities up and down the country are looking to the 3 of us to see whether their arrangements might change as well. So this year has been one of establishing the new arrangements. All the subgroups have been established. There's 9 subgroups in total, which report into an operational board and an executive board, both of which I chair. And those subgroups have agreed their membership, their terms of reference, and they've brought together all the strategic plan, all of the strategic plans from each of the previous arrangements together. So this year has been quite an unwieldy year, if you will, of making sure that those previous plans didn't fall through any gaps, and we pulled them together. Next year, we plan to deliver a new strategy for the partnership for the forthcoming 3 years, which will tone down, I suspect, some of the issues and bring them together to make the agenda much more manageable. We're in the process of producing a performance framework, and this report, which extends to some 55 pages, I beg your pardon, contains a lot of data which has come from the previous partnerships. And it's my plan for next year's report to have a document that is much more accessible to the community, is one that's much easier to understand and work with, and much more punchy in its requirements. There are some statutory requirements as to the matters we need to include in the report, and those will be a detailed, not detail, but information about the child practice reviews and safeguarding adult reviews that have taken place during the year in question. We'll be presenting the budget next year. We'll be presenting the new strategy for the year to follow and reporting on how we've delivered in this year. So there will be changes next year. It is quite an unwieldy document at the moment, and my experience of chairing other partnerships is that members of health and wellbeing boards and other strategic partners have welcomed a bit of a toned down approach to this annual report. The report's been pulled together by the business manager with colleagues on the subgroups, and I would just like to present it for your consideration and for any questions. I'll try to answer as many as I can. I wasn't around for the first 6 months of the year, and Leslie, I'm sure, will be able to step in if there are any questions that relate to matters or activities before I joined. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for that contribution. So if we can open it up to the board, please. Please feel free to use the chat function, or I can see a hand. So if we can turn to Paul, please.
Thanks, Bryn. It's quite a long and detailed report. There's a lot of information in there, and I may well have missed it, but I just wondered if you could talk a bit more about the impact of county lines on vulnerable communities, because certainly from my perspective, in terms of social housing, we see a lot of activity in areas where we have homes, and it's a real concern, and we work really hard with the police on that. But I just wonder what the role of this group is to try and help combat that phenomenon.
Thank you. That's really interesting, because I think the issue of county lines, of the criminal business model, if you will, of trafficking drugs across communities and using vulnerable people to support the sale of illicit drugs, is something which is well known in the housing world, as well as in other parts. It's an area that touches children's services, because often children and vulnerable young people are used. Either people have been leaving care and have been cuckooed in, it's the phrase, or somebody has moved into their flat post leaving care, to use that as a base for dealing and marketing illicit drugs. And it's a case that it impacts on vulnerable adults and on community safety as well. So county lines is very much part of the agenda of all the previous safeguarding partnerships, and the coming together of the new arrangements with BAMES will ensure that there is a single strategic approach to organisations, to supporting organisations to raise awareness, to alert the public, and to make sure that we can tackle that at all levels. So I think it's a really good point to raise. It's something that we can improve our response to by the opportunities we have to work together strategically on this partnership.
Excellent. Thank you. Leslie, please.
Thank you. So, Sean, if you don't mind, can I add a little bit as well about what the exploitation group are doing with response to that? So there is, some time ago now, we developed a joint county lines statement that was sent out to all partners within the Community Safety and Safeguarding Partnership. And in addition to that, we've got two layers as well. There's a strategic group that looks at exploitation in its broadest sense, and then there is also an operational group that looks at child sexual exploitation and also criminal exploitation as well. And the county line discussion feeds in at that very operational level as well as at the strategic level. Now, we did have at one point the police, and Councillor Guy, I believe you were present at that session as well. We had the police came and did a very up-to-date discussion about what county line activity was taking place across Bath and North East Somerset. And obviously those lines start and stop, and they're up and down, aren't we, as we all know, and we need to keep abreast of that. So that is one of the jobs of that exploitation group, is to keep aware of what line activity is taking place as well, to help all the partners keep involved so that they can help tackle that. So there is some very strategic thinking going on around it, around the disruption of those lines, but there's also the very clear operational group that happens as well and feeds in.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay, I'm just turning to the group now. Okay, no, any further questions or comments on the report? If not, we'll turn to the recommendations. So if we can just look at those. So to note the report, raising queries and recommend any additional areas to give consideration to in 2020 to 21. So I think we've done that. If there's any further comments on that? No, so nothing particularly to recommend. Okay. Thank you, John. Thanks for your time, and look forward to hearing further on that again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay, so into the agenda, item 10. So we're at the date of next meeting already. So that will be on Tuesday, the 24th of November. So approximately 8 weeks' time. And I believe that is all for today. So finishing slightly early. So thank you everyone for your time today in the public session and in the work leading up to that. I hope it's productive for this group moving forwards, and it's recognised as a work in progress, but I think everyone recognises the value of this group from those discussions, so take a lot of heart from that. Just looking around, anything urgent, not particularly any other business, but I can't see any hands or comments. So yeah, thank you for your time, and we'll see you again.
Thanks, Bryn.
Thank you, Bryn.